where is Malaysia Airlines Flight 370?
There is absolutely no question that he was a qualified, competent pilot.
Malaysian Airlines. Flight 37 Cero has been found, and what they uncovered is beyond shocking. This plane vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and heartbreak. For years, search teams combed the oceans. Experts argued over theories, and families waited for news that never came. But could the truth be even more unbelievable than we ever imagined? Tune in, because what was just discovered will unleash a war between Malaysia and Russia. The vanishing of Flight 370. March 8, 2014. Flight 37. Cero took off just after midnight carrying 239 people. Everything seemed normal as the massive Boeing soared into the night sky. Pilots exchanged their routine communications, confirming altitude, staying on course. But within an hour, something bizarre happened. The plane veered off its planned path and went dark. No radar, no transponder signals, no radio calls. It was as if the aircraft had decided to disappear. Before we dive into this, one thing is certain: what happened to Flight 37 Cero is far more disturbing than anyone ever imagined.
Malaysia 37 was a commercial flight. Malaysia Airlines was a routine procedure, a routine flight, as we say.
And what was just uncovered will leave you speechless. Military radars picked up strange movements. The jet turned west, flying over the Malaysian peninsula, then vanished again near the Andaman Sea. For hours, search teams scrambled, desperate for any sign of the missing plane. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and still, nothing. Wreckage was nowhere to be found. Families were left in agony, and aviation experts were baffled. How could a massive jet just disappear in an age of advanced technology? As time passed, pieces of debris began washing up on distant shores. A fragment of a wing appeared on Reunion Island, thousands of miles away from where the plane was last tracked. More parts were discovered in Madagascar, Mozambique, and Tanzania. But these discoveries only raised more questions. How did the plane end up so far from its intended route? What happened in those final hours before it crashed into the ocean? And now, a shocking revelation has surfaced. A group of researchers working with advanced sonar technology claims they have finally pinpointed the final resting place of Flight 37 Cero. Deep beneath the Indian Ocean, an eerie wreck sits untouched.
Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. Good night, Malaysia 370.
A frozen moment in time. But why was it found there? And more importantly, what does this discovery mean for the unanswered questions that have haunted this case for years? Was this a deliberate act? Did something catastrophic happen in midair? Theories range from mechanical failures to hijacking to an out-of-control fire. Some suggest the pilot was responsible, steering the plane into the ocean in a tragic act of intent. Others believe an unknown force took over, leading to the aircraft's bizarre movements before its final descent. Yet despite all the theories, one thing is certain: someone, somewhere, knows more than they're saying. The discovery of Flight 37 Cero's remains is a breakthrough, but it's not the end of the story. What about the black boxes? The voice recordings? If recovered, they could finally provide answers to what really happened that night. But with the wreckage lying in one of the most remote and treacherous parts of the ocean, retrieving them won't be easy. The world is watching, waiting for the next move. On March 19, 2014, people from different places saw something that didn't make sense. Fishermen, oil rig workers, and islanders in the Maldives all shared strange stories. Some said they saw a plane flying way too low, others saw fire in the sky. One oil rig worker far southeast of Wong reported something burning, which caught the attention of Vietnamese authorities. They thought it was worth investigating, and so a search mission began. But this was just the beginning of something that would become much bigger and much more confusing. Then there were the Indonesian fishermen. They had their own chilling tale. They swore they saw a plane crash near the Malacca Straits. That would mean the plane was nowhere near where it was supposed to be. To make things even more unsettling, 3 months later, a British woman sailing the Indian Ocean came forward. She said she saw a plane on fire in the distance, a sight that left her shaken and wondering what could have caused such a terrifying event. Different people, different places, but the same disturbing details. What really happened that night? The disappearance of Flight 370 was already one of the strangest events in aviation history, and these reports only made it stranger. The official search began in the South China Sea, the expected flight path. But then a shocking revelation changed everything. The plane had turned west, completely off course. That meant the entire search was happening in the wrong place. So the effort moved to a new region, the Strait of Mala and the Andaman Sea. But with every new clue, the situation only became more confusing and the truth seemed further away. Just when search teams thought they knew where to look, new information appeared, sending them in a completely different direction. The plane that changed its course.
The plane's transponder is effectively the instrument which sends out a signal to air traffic control.
Then came another bombshell. Satellite signals showed that the plane had kept flying for hours after it vanished. That meant for a long time someone or something was still in control. But where was it headed? On March 15th, a week after the plane disappeared, Inmarsat, a satellite company, released new data. The plane had gone one of two ways, either far south, deep into the Indian Ocean, or north, toward places like Vietnam or Turkmenistan. Either way, things were not adding up. A commercial jet full of passengers had been flying for hours without anyone knowing where it was. How does that even happen? At this point, the search effort turned desperate. It was clear that looking in the South China Sea was a waste of time, so investigators had to rethink everything. Two possible routes made sense. The northern route, that meant flying over multiple countries like Thailand and Kazakhstan, places with strong military radar. If Flight 370 had passed through, someone would have noticed. No reports came in. That left only one real option, the southern route leading deep into the Indian Ocean. But that meant something even worse. If the plane had gone south, it had nowhere to land safely. That meant one thing, it had crashed into the sea. Then, on March 24, 2014, the Malaysian Prime Minister made an announcement no one wanted to hear. Based on the final satellite signals, the plane had gone down in the southern Indian Ocean. There were no islands, no emergency landings, just endless open water. This wasn't a case of a lost plane waiting to be found. It was gone. And the 239 people on board, no chance of survival. The world had to accept that Flight 370 had ended in one of the most remote, unforgiving parts of the ocean. But that wasn't the end of the story, because now things got even more bizarre. It was already the most expensive search in aviation history, and they still had nothing to show for it. Then, on April 6, 2014, something happened. An Australian ship picked up strange signals deep in the ocean, about 1,200 miles northwest of Perth, Australia. They thought they had found the plane's black box. If that were true, they would finally have answers. But as quickly as the signals were detected, they disappeared. There was no wreckage, no debris, nothing that could confirm where the plane had gone. This was no ordinary crash. No plane simply vanishes without a trace, and yet Flight 370 did exactly that. The lack of answers only fueled more theories. Was it a hijacking, a cover-up, something even worse? Months passed and still no wreckage was found. Then something else made things even stranger.
But then that poses the question, well, why did they hijack the aircraft? What was the motive? And why fly to the southern Indian Ocean?
In July of that same year, another Malaysia Airlines flight, Flight 17, was shot down over Ukraine, eliminating 298 people. Another Boeing, another tragedy just months apart. Was it a coincidence, or was there more going on? The world waited for answers, but none came. The more they searched, the less they found. Debris did eventually wash up in different places, but nothing that explained what truly happened that night in March. What caused the plane to go off course? Who or what was in control after it vanished from radar? And why, after all these years, do we still not have a clear explanation? Flight 370 remains one of the greatest aviation disasters in history, not just because of the loss of life, but because of the terrifying reality it revealed. A modern aircraft with all its technology can simply disappear, and no one can say for certain why. The search for Flight 370 was filled with frustration, dead ends, and theories that only led to more confusion. Early on, there was excitement when a series of signals were detected deep in the Indian Ocean, thought to be from the black box of the missing plane. But hope didn't last long. Experts realized the battery on the black box was likely out of power, making the search nearly impossible. Desperate for answers, they sent a robotic submarine into the depths, hoping to find something, anything that would give them a clue. The results? Absolutely nothing. Doubts started creeping in. Could those signals have been false? Some believed the acoustic equipment used to detect them had malfunctioned, tricking everyone into thinking they were on the right track when in reality they were wasting time. Still, the search pressed on, dragging into June of the year 2015, but no wreckage turned up. Then, out of nowhere, a breakthrough. On July 29th of that same year, a piece of the plane's wing, called a flaperon, washed up on the shore of Reunion Island, thousands of miles away from where authorities had been looking. If that wasn't baffling enough, in the months that followed, more debris turned up in countries like Tanzania, Mozambique, and Madagascar. Pieces of the plane were scattered, but what did that mean? Every clue only made things more confusing, but what came next hinted that this wasn't just an accident. It may have been done on purpose. The ocean kept its silence. Examinations of the recovered wreckage painted a grim picture. The way some parts were damaged suggested the plane hadn't made a controlled landing. It had crashed violently into the ocean. Some experts suggested it had taken a steep nosedive into the water, a terrifying way for any flight to end. Despite these chilling conclusions, the official search for Flight 370 ended in January of the year 2017. The governments of Malaysia, Australia, and China agreed there was no point in continuing. But not everyone was willing to let the case go. An American company, Ocean Infinity, took up the mission. Their efforts lasted until May of the year 2018, but just like before, the ocean swallowed its questions whole. There was nothing. That same year, a report came out, one that pointed to a chilling possibility. What if Flight 370 hadn't simply disappeared, but had been hijacked? And if so, by who? As soon as the report was released, speculation exploded.
Everything was routine until now. 2 minutes after talking with air traffic control, 40 minutes into the flight.
Many had suspected foul play for years, and this was the closest thing to confirmation. One piece of evidence stood out. 2 passengers had boarded the flight with stolen passports. These weren't just any passports. One belonged to an Austrian citizen and the other to an Italian. They had been reported stolen in Thailand years before, and somehow no one had noticed. Interpol had them flagged in their system, yet airport security let these 2 men through without checking. Was it a careless mistake, or was something more sinister going on? Then things got even more suspicious. Reports surfaced that a man in Bangkok had purchased the tickets for these 2 passengers, paying in cash and asking for the cheapest flight to Europe. When authorities dug deeper, they found that these men were young Iranians, one 19 and the other 29. The official explanation? They were asylum seekers looking for a way to start a new life. That might have explained the stolen passports, but it didn't explain what happened to the plane. Theories ran wild. Some suggested it was a terrorist attack, while others insisted it was a hijacking gone wrong. The Malaysian government had its own concerns, with officials criticizing their country's immigration officers for letting the 2 men board in the first place. Meanwhile, teams from the United States and Malaysia combed through the personal histories of every single passenger on board. Even China launched its own investigation, determined to find any clue that could explain how a plane carrying so many of its citizens had simply vanished. One name briefly caught investigators' attention: a Swiss flight engineer who happened to be on board. His background in aviation made authorities take a second look, but there was no clear evidence linking him to anything suspicious. And then came a theory that sent shockwaves through conspiracy circles. What if Russian agents had taken control of the flight and crashed it somewhere in Kazakhstan? As wild as that sounded, it gained traction among those desperate for answers. The theory that Flight 370 vanished as a way to distract from Russia's moves in Crimea was bold but flimsy. People love a good spy story, but there was no solid proof to back this up. What really kept the world talking was something much creepier. Passengers' phones still ringing long after the plane disappeared. Desperate families kept calling, hoping to hear a voice, but instead they got ringing tones. That tiny sound set off a wildfire of theories, some even questioning if the plane had ever crashed at all. Telecom experts quickly shut this down, explaining that ringing doesn't mean a call is going through. It's just the network trying to connect before giving up. But who was really convinced? The idea of a plane vanishing in thin air without a single goodbye message from anyone on board was already stretching belief. How could not one of those passengers, people who lived on their phones, send a final message? The lack of any communication made everything feel staged, controlled, and too clean. Military radars spotted Flight 370 doing things no one expected.
Of MH370's captain, Zahari Ahmed Shah, has consistently rejected the idea that he could ever have been responsible for deliberately crashing the jet.
It climbed absurdly high, nearly 45,000 feet, way beyond what it should have. Then it dropped, fast, to less than 23,000 feet before settling again. If that doesn't scream something unusual, what does? This erratic movement could explain why phones didn't work, too high, no signal, but it also raised more questions. Who was flying that plane? And why? As people kept searching for answers, they started looking closely at the pilots and what they might have done before the plane disappeared. What the pilots left behind. Investigators soon turned their eyes to the cockpit. They raided the homes of the pilot and co-pilot, combing through their lives, their bank records, their families. The pilot, Zahari Ahmad Shah, stood out for one chilling reason: his personal flight simulator. On it, they found deleted routes eerily similar to Flight 370's final path deep into the Indian Ocean. Deleted, but recovered. That kind of match doesn't just happen by accident. Was this a trial run? Zahari's personal life also seemed to be unraveling. His marriage was crumbling, and he had close ties to a political figure who had just been sentenced to prison. Did this push him to the edge? His family and friends refused to believe it. They insisted he loved flying too much to do something this drastic. But then why was his flight simulator mapped out like the plane's actual disappearance? Too many coincidences make a pattern, don't they? With Zahari under scrutiny, another strange twist appeared. His co-pilot, Farik Abdul Hamid, tried making a phone call while the plane was flying low over Malaysia. The call barely connected before dropping. Who was he trying to reach? Was he calling for help? Was he trying to send a warning? The call itself wasn't just a small detail. It was a crack in the wall, a clue that something far more sinister was at play. From the start, the people in charge stayed tight-lipped. No real details, no names, no clear answers. The secrecy only fueled the fire. Whispers spread like wildfire, each one wilder than the last.
You have an Air Force, if it's not capable of doing something like this, that's a big error. That's a big mistake, and frankly, the Malaysian government has not really accounted for it in a proper way.
Some believed the pilot was struggling with personal demons and in a moment of crisis did the unthinkable. If that theory were true, it paints a chilling picture. Imagine locking yourself in the cockpit, shutting down all systems and leaving everyone on board helpless. A plane full of passengers trapped with no way to stop what's coming. A terrifying thought, but speculation alone isn't enough. The whole thing was already tragic, but these theories made it even worse. And then there was another angle, one that painted a very different picture. Farik was not some broken man ready to give up. He was deeply in love, engaged to a fellow pilot and excited about his future. A wedding was on the horizon. A new life was about to begin. Hardly the profile of someone who was about to throw it all away. His passion for flying wasn't just a job, it was his dream. He had worked hard to get where he was, and he was proud of it. People who knew him said he lived for flying. This wasn't a man who would destroy the very thing he loved, yet the theories about him persisted, as if no one wanted to believe there could be another explanation. So, what happened? The contrast between these theories is too big to ignore. One paints him as a desperate man at his breaking point. The other shows a man with a bright future ahead. Both cannot be true, and yet neither one provides the real answer. With every new detail, the questions only got deeper. Was there something bigger at play? Could there have been a cover-up, something officials didn't want the world to know? The authorities stayed quiet, offering just enough to keep people guessing, but never enough to provide real closure. Silence speaks volumes, and in this case, it only made things worse. Then there was the technical side. How did the plane just vanish? A massive aircraft filled with people disappearing without a trace. No wreckage, no emergency signal, nothing. It was as if it had been wiped from existence. That kind of disappearance doesn't just happen. Someone or something made it happen. Flight data showed the plane took a strange turn, heading toward one of the most isolated parts of the ocean. Some said it was controlled flight, meaning someone was at the helm the whole time. Others insisted it was a complete systems failure, leaving it to drift to its doom. Both ideas had problems. Neither explained why there were no distress calls or why the plane's communication systems went dark all at once. And then, of course, there was the idea that no one wanted to say out loud. Was the plane taken? Could someone have intercepted it, controlled it, hidden it? If so, who? And why? The longer the search went on without answers, the more people leaned into theories that sounded like science fiction. But sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. Years later, the wreckage that was found only deepened the confusion. Pieces of the plane washed up on remote beaches, but they didn't give the full picture. They only confirmed what everyone already knew. The plane went down. But why? And how? The pieces weren't enough to tell the story. They only added more layers to the case. The passengers, the crew, their families, they deserved answers. Yet all they got were vague reports, theories that changed with the wind, and a silence that felt deliberate. Something didn't add up, and maybe it never would. Was Flight 370 truly lost to the ocean, or is there something much bigger that has been kept from the world? Could the truth behind its disappearance be far more shocking than we were led to believe? Some say the latest discovery answers everything, while others argue it only raises more questions. What do you think really happened? Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.